Hi, everyone. Welcome to my presentation, Epic Owners, the Key to Strategic Unification. My name is Charlene Cuenca. I'm a Principal Consultant, SAFE Fellow, SPCT, and SAFE Contributor with ICON Agility. In today's session, we're going to discuss the role of the Epic Owners, including who they are, what they enable, and where they come from. We'll also talk about how Epic Owners unify strategic intent by coordinating throughout the organizational hierarchy. We'll also discuss how Epic Owners enable end-to-end portfolio Kanban flow using the lean startup cycle, and then discuss how to spot and avoid Epic Owner anti-patterns, and also identify some success patterns. Let's first talk about unification. When you bring together unlike elements, you unify them. Political movements can unify people by inspiring them to work towards a shared goal. Frequently, as a change agent, I come into organizations and I have conversations with executive leadership and senior leadership across some of the business units that I'm helping. But the common pattern that I've seen is whether I'm talking to the chief technology officer or senior leader in product or the business unit leadership, everyone's got a different lens on what the strategy is and what the priorities are. So by leveraging the role of the Epic Owner, we can leverage their skill sets to help make sure we actually have a joined understanding of what the strategy is in a given business unit, and also have a clear joined up view on what the priorities are. Because it's only until then, when we have people working towards a shared goal, that we can start to really achieve the strategic intent. Let's talk more about the role of the Epic Owner. So the Epic Owner, we can see, is featured as a first-class citizen on the framework, and they're a key part of the lean portfolio management competency. One of the things we want to keep in mind is that an Epic Owner is a role and not a title. Depending on what strategic initiative areas are at play in any given business unit, some of those things may be more technology-facing in terms of strategy, or they could be directly business-facing. But in either case, we want to make sure that we've got the right folks that are involved in those strategic initiative areas wearing the Epic Owner hat. So we don't want to say that it's necessarily from a specific part of the organizational hierarchy. They're also the primary shepherds of the Portfolio Kanban. It's through the Portfolio Kanban that the Epic Owners are really unlocking themselves as a true unifier of value. Because in the Kanban system, we want to make sure that we bring the right people from the right functions to the right conversations at the right time. And as such, they help coordinate those functional silos to really help them unify and align around the strategic intent. So the Epic Owners in general help us with the key SAFE principles that you see here. One of them is taking an economic view. As a shepherd of the Portfolio Kanban, we want to make sure that across the different functions we bring into the conversation, which includes folks from product, from engineering, from architecture, from the business, from operations, from delivery, whatever groups are relevant to be part of the discussion, we want to make sure we walk away with an understanding of the priorities that we're considering for this piece of the strategy. So taking an economic view here is a key piece. And it's through the Kanban system that we use prioritization techniques to really help us with that, the true priority of that strategic area in the Epic. And applying systems thinking, like I just said, by bringing together some of those different functional groups, we are actually making sure that we're not just optimizing for our functional area, but we're aligning around the strategic intent of that Epic. By leveraging and shepherding epics through the Portfolio Kanban system, that helps us visualize and limit WIP and also reduce batch sizes and manage queue lengths as we move and flow through the Portfolio Kanban system. So as such, we can see that Epic Owners really help us organize around value, which is another key SAFE principle. So let's talk more about unifying strategic intent. We know that Epic Owners are one of the key roles to help us with this. They coordinate throughout the entire organizational hierarchy, and that brings us to the dual operating system of business agility. We focus on, in the framework, we focus on the virtual value stream network that really helps us shape and deliver value through our agile release trains in any given business unit or portfolio. But underneath the hood, we have the organizational hierarchy. And it's from this organizational hierarchy that the Epic Owner will, pull the right people into those conversations as they're shepherding epics through the Kanban to make sure that we really do have a co-joint understanding of the strategic intent of an epic. So they may work with some other members of the portfolio management team, coordinating with them, bringing them into epic refinement or epic workshops, and also with product and solution management. We also talked before as well that the enterprise architect may be, a type of Epic Owner where they're helping to shepherd technology strategy through the portfolio Kanban if it's a really heavy technology facing Epic. So Epic owners can be representing business strategy and also enabler epics that are more technically facing. As we get those epics through the portfolio Kanban process onto the portfolio backlog and prioritized appropriately, then the trains can help with the process by defining some of the features that are associated with the epics. And there'll be a close partnership between the epic owner role and the release train engineer and potentially some of the SMEs as we move into the implementation state of the Kanban. So with that, we could say that the epic owner works with the various functional areas, both horizontally in the portfolio as well as vertically as we move into the agile release trains processes. And through shepherding the epics through the portfolio Kanban, they use key artifacts as an aid in unifying strategic intent. So no matter the state that we're in the Kanban, we can leverage things like a lean business case to make sure we've defined it well and that through those different functions, whether it be architecture, engineering, delivery, product, and the business, that we really are aligned in terms of strategy. So with that, we can say that the epic owner unifies the roles across the organizational hierarchy with that joined up understanding. So let's talk a bit more about the portfolio Kanban. The portfolio Kanban is really the mechanism that epic owners use to really flow value delivery through the ecosystem in that given portfolio or business area. So when we look at the front half of the Kanban, this is really where the epic owners are getting the right people into the conversations, and they help drive the definition and unified understanding of value across those functions. So we may pull things from the funnel into the review state, but the epic owner is not going to define these things by themselves. They're going to make sure that there's cross-functional representation, the portfolio leadership team or anyone else that needs to take part in the discussion across architecture, engineering, product, the business, operations, or delivery. And they're going to define the epic together, or at least make sure they're aligned on what the epic is intending to do. So here we're just really trying to make sure we have an understanding of the what of the epic. What are we trying to do? What's the potential business benefit? And high-level cost estimates and prioritization using WSGIF. So we're making sure we take that economic view, not in a silo, but across the functions. Now, if it's showing high priority here and really positive business benefit, then we may move this into the analyzing state where we now have an opportunity to go a level deeper on the co-joined understanding of the intent of the epic. We leverage the lean business case as that key artifact to really help make sure that we're aligned on the intent of the epic. So in here, we'll define things like the MVP, we'll identify leading indicators, and also make sure we're clear on the true outcome we're trying to achieve. With the MVP, we may also create some additional potential features where if the MVP is showing positive movement, then we may start with some additional potential features down the line. And it's through this lean business case that we can align all the viewpoints from the different functions and also use that as a way to get started and gain a go or no-go decision. So once we get that, then it goes to the portfolio backlog, and then now we're ready for the trains to pull this into their process and take some of those MVP features and additional potential features for consideration in their PI planning cycles for the next PI and future PIs that are part of their PI roadmap. So this helps us really with the defined understanding across the functions of the value we're trying to achieve. So once those features that the trains help define and refine as part of a future PI now make it into a PI planning process, then the Epic moves into implementing. And one of the key things that the Epic owner does is make sure that they're coordinating and collaborating with the release train engineer and the roles that are part of the agile release trains to evaluate early and often, the progress and the benefits that we're getting so far, starting with the MVP. So by attending system demos and making sure stakeholders take part in those system demos, we can help evaluate, are we actually achieving the value that we've defined in leading indicators on the lead business case? So from that point, we can make a pivot or persevere decision. And it's the Epic owner that can make sure the right people are involved in that conversation. They could decide that we want to pivot away from the Epic because there's other Epics queued up on the portfolio backlog that might actually get more benefit from this. And maybe the leading indicators aren't showing that we're actually going to get the benefit we actually thought. Perfectly okay to pivot away and ignore sunk costs. Or it could be the other end of the spectrum where we're seeing a lot of benefit. The leading indicators are actually showing very positive trends. And we want to continue through the lean startup cycle of introducing additional potential features that we define in the lean business case into the PI planning cycles. So that cycle would continue, that early evaluation and continued evaluation using the lean startup cycle so that we can evaluate early and often the benefit that we're getting from this Epic. And it's the Epic owner that really helps us with this, with aggregating the results and the decisions we're seeing from the Agile Release Train's PI planning cycles. The other thing we want to think about as well is that, leveraging the Epic owners, especially early in your journey, they can actually be a bridge to help you start to implant the seeds of lean portfolio management very early in the implementation process. So we've got the implementation roadmap here, and we can see that we can start to introduce some of the lean portfolio management concepts very early on in your journey, even before we've launched any or, most of your agile release trains. So, in one example I can give where we had a retrospective, there was an executive team I was working with, and one of the executives said in the retrospective, he said that one wish that I would make if we could do this over again is I would introduce lean portfolio management much sooner. Having the role of the Epic owner and having folks that are focused on the largest strategic initiatives for our organization, has really netted a lot of benefits. And it's through that we really have a better understanding for the agile release trains what the strategy is that they should be focusing on. So I thought that was very telling. So we do have an opportunity here, first of all, to understand the strategy in the enterprise or the specific business unit that you're working with, but also making sure we identify who these future Epic owners might be and get them involved earlier in the process. A frequent pattern I've used is definitely understanding the strategy at the organization I'm trying to help, but also looking for those people that are managing those strategic initiative areas today, because they more than likely would be a candidate to be a future Epic owner. And I want to pull them into leading safe very early on. So we usually will run a leading safe class with leadership before we've even started defining what our implementation plan might look like. And I want to bring some of those potential future Epic owners into that leading safe class. And what I've found is usually when I do that, it creates a pull, because once I start to plant some of the seeds around the lean portfolio management concepts and some of the artifacts that are associated with that and how that could work, they get really interested, and they start to, even after the class, they start to want more information and, how can we use some of these artifacts today? So that's one example how you can kind of bridge that, is identify them early, bring them to the first safe class, and they actually start to pull into the process rather than you having to pull them in. And another example I can cite too with starting the shift a little early and leveraging your potential future Epic owners is really, I had another enterprise I worked with where they had an agile release train going, but the specific business unit where I was working with their executives really called out that they were struggling to see progress. This was in a portfolio where they hadn't implemented any agile release trains yet, but they were struggling to see progress, and they were primarily in a waterfall model. And they were wondering, how they can introduce some new strategic initiatives in here when they couldn't even see what was going on. So I heard that, expressed some empathy, and then, what I suggested was, let's go ahead and do some homework, give me this information, tell me what you have in flight today, and let's meet back together and let's just take a look at all of this information. So I did my own data aggregation, and I set up what would be considered a preliminary version of a portfolio sync with the portfolio leadership across product and the business and architecture, engineering and delivery and operations as well. And basically had taken all of the things they had in flight and things that they were queuing up and put them in the different states in the portfolio Kanban. And it was very eye-opening, right? Because I took a lot of the stuff that was already in implementing, and that's, the stuff they have in flight that's work in progress. And that by itself actually was surprising to them, because they had no idea that some of the stuff was even being focused on. They're like, I didn't see that piece, Charlene, before this day. Like, where did that come from? How did it get prioritized? And it really served as a nice forcing function for the functional leaders to talk together and really start to get aligned around the value, even before we move into the SAFE model. So they were surprised at the number of things they had in flight. They had a better understanding of why things maybe were taking longer and why they couldn't introduce new strategy to be executed upon. And usually my litmus test for success in running small, experiments like this is, was this session valuable to you? And in that specific example, I got feedback that absolutely. Do you see the people that are in the room today? We never talk. And just by getting us in the room, we learned so much more information in this, 1 hour meeting you put together than we have, over the course of the past several weeks and months. So we want to continue this, but that's another way that you can actually, I had my potential future Epic owners in there, and they were actually helping facilitate with me, leveraging them as a bridge, because they helped collect some of the data that I needed to have this discussion. And they could also hear from the stakeholder community, where the disconnect was, and some ways that we can now start to align and work together. Leverage your Epic owners, identify who they are, leverage some of the things we could already use by exposing and being transparent about what's in flight and what's potentially queued up. So help them align as a portfolio team on some of the progress or lack thereof of the strategy that they are responsible for, and also helps us start the lean agile mindset shift around portfolio management very early on, so that as we get into the implementation and launching more trains, that we're ready for more of that as we move further down the path. So let's talk about some anti-patterns, and we'll also talk about some success factors as well. So epic owner anti-patterns, these are some things that we want to make sure we don't do as we make this transition to enable our epic owners to really focus around strategic intent. Epics are not projects, so we don't want to make that connection that, hey, we can just move in, start to move into the lean portfolio management space and build a backlog by just creating a one-to-one relationship between epics and projects. We definitely don't want to do that. We want to be aligned around value, and that's really the role of the epic owner to help us define those well. So we want to look at the strategy that's at play in any given organization or business unit and really understand, what are some of the drivers within that? And from that kind of strategic discussion, that's how we should shape our epics. They are definitely not supposed to be a reincarnation of projects. On the same topic, the epic owner is a project manager in disguise. We definitely don't want this as well. As we make that shift from traditional portfolio management processes to lean and agile portfolio management and focusing on value delivery, we don't simply want to just rebadge project managers and program managers as epic owners out of the gate, right? As long as we're organized around value and understand the initiatives that we're trying to focus on, the epic owner should really be the right people that are going to be driving those strategic initiatives forward. Simply calling your existing project managers and program managers in your ecosystem epic owners is not going to give you the true benefits of lean portfolio management. So we definitely want to avoid this one. And then the portfolio backlog is a work breakdown structure. This is a definite no-no. When we're focused on, organizing ourselves around value and understanding the strategic intent of the enterprise as well as the business units that we're trying to help, we want to make sure that we think about the enterprise backlog structure that the portfolio backlog is a part of is actually focused on incremental value delivery. The different parts of the enterprise backlog structure naturally affinitize towards different planning horizons. From a portfolio perspective, we care about planning horizons that, might take less than a year, might take about a year, might take a little longer. And we want to make sure we're articulating epics that tie to the strategy for that planning horizon. And we articulate the benefit we're going to get through creating these epics, with the other functions in an aligned fashion. But those are not implementable by themselves. So as part of our enterprise backlog structure, we need to decompose those into features. And the features are really centered around the PI planning cycles of the Agile release train and that type of planning horizon. But features are created in such a way that they contain a piece of that original epics benefit that we're trying to implement incrementally. And once we get those defined for a given PI and it makes it through the PI planning process, then of course the teams will have articulated some stories that are part of those features, but those stories also have value in and of themselves, and they tie to the benefit outcomes that we were trying to achieve in the feature, which tie back to the outcome hypothesis of the epic. So the way we want to think about the portfolio backlog is the starting point for incremental value delivery, not a work breakdown structure. So we definitely want to avoid this pattern. Epic owners are only allowed to come from one functional area. As I've mentioned previously, epic owners really are a role and not a title. And we want to make sure that based on our understanding of the strategy for a given business unit or portfolio, that we have the right folks that are wearing those hats to drive those strategic initiatives forward in the form of creating those value-oriented epics that clearly tie back to that. So we don't want to just relegate the role to say that, they only can come from one specific functional area like, the PMO or only the delivery organization or only product managers. This really isn't, it depends based on the context of your portfolio. So we want to keep our minds open when it comes to that. And let's talk about some success factors as well. So we talked before about the Kanban system and lean portfolio management, the epic owner as a bridge to help us get there over time. When we think about, how we can get started with this, you can see on the graphic that we've got lean portfolio management concepts being instilled and implanted very early on in the implementation roadmap, and that's by design. So understand the strategy. there's some strategy that our agile release trains or future agile release trains are trying to align around. So let's make sure we understand what that strategy is. Let's understand what some of those strategic drivers are. And let's make sure we've got, identified our future Epic owners that are tied to these areas, identified very early in the process. We want to make sure that we bring them on the journey very early and let them start to pull themselves into the process. But one of the critical steps here is once you identify those future potential Epic owners, get them into your first leading safe class that you run for that organization. More often than not, this is something that I've noticed that people will pull themselves into once they have an initial understanding of lean portfolio management and what it can do. Start using some of the lean business cases early. If they get leading safe training, they get a high level overview of the portfolio Kanban, the tie back to strategy, and potential use of a lean business case. A lot of times in my experience, I've found that these potential future Epic owners start to really want to use this early on. They see value in it as a really concise and succinct artifact. And this is your opportunity to really be that strategic unifier across the strategy for your business unit. So the lean business case is a good way to get started with that. The other piece here as well is making sure that we understand this is a transition over time. Even though we could start planting the seeds of LPM early and some of the ways that the Epic owner can help be that unifier, it is a transition over time. We want to make sure that we get that those ideas planted early in the process, but we still need to make sure that we've got our arts identified, that we have an implementation plan on how we're going to launch them and when. And once we get critical mass in that specific business unit, then we're more ready for lean portfolio management when we do get that critical mass later on in the implementation roadmap. It is a transition over time, but your Epic owners are definitely going to help you in this space if we get them involved early. In summary, epics are large in scope and scale and require a lot of coordination. So we want to make sure that they're set up for success in terms of helping to define these epics so they truly are aligned around value. They are an important role to help unify the functions around the strategic intent of an epic, because they're the ones that are bringing the folks from product and engineering and delivery and some of the other functions into the conversation so that we're aligned around the value that we can get out of some of these epics. We can also leverage some of those LPM concepts early to aid in the transition from traditional methods with your future Epic owners as the conduit. By avoiding some of the anti-patterns I mentioned earlier, the Epic owner can truly be your key to strategic unification. So thanks for attending my talk today. I hope you got some valuable information, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Thank you.